Why traditional EHRs can't do functional medicine and what that's actually costing you. Okay, a patient came in with chronic migraines. Her previous records, all from a traditional EHR, which I had to swim through, showed one diagnosis: chronic unresolved migraine. Treatment path? Reading many records: Botox, Maxalt, ergot derivatives, neurology referrals, headache specialists, years of this. And when we evaluated her actual history, the full narrative, there was a structural component that no one had ever documented. A fall at a skating rink years before, cracked tailbone, neck and low back pain for years. The headache started around the same time. Well, once we addressed the structural trigger, the headache's resolved. The EHR didn't miss this because the doctor was incompetent. It missed it because the system has no place to document how past history informs the current problem. It's designed to get the migraine diagnosis coded properly so that the bill can be submitted, not to connect the patient's story. All right. If you're a functional medicine provider working until midnight documenting what happened during the day, this is not a time management problem, it's a software problem. And you've been gaslit into thinking it's your fault. You may have been offered like a seminar on depression or burnout. Don't go. I have a better idea. Traditional EHRs were never designed for narrative medicine. They were designed for billing factories. The cost isn't just time, it's your clinical reasoning, it's your ability to think, your family, your passion for medicine itself. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why your documentation burden is not a personal failure. It should be a huge relief. It's a fundamental incompatibility between how functional medicine works, good integrative medicine, and how traditional EHRs were built. Completely different. And what documentation actually looks like when the software shows you respect as your clinical thinking works instead of destroying it. Why traditional EHRs can't capture the patient narrative that functional medicine requires? Well, let's start with the fundamental incompatibility and why you can't template or optimize your way out of it. Your EHR was never designed for the kind of medicine that you practice, and here's what that actually looks like in the room. When a patient is evaluated in a functional medicine practice, the doctor knows all the details about each system, every symptom, and all the relevant history. But traditional EHRs don't collect that information in a way that's detailed or graphically presented. They just grab it on a mind-numbing checklist. You've seen them. Not good. Then, in better bad situations, it's manually scored or painfully integrated through raw brain power while you read it and try to hold it all together and process it. And here's what that looks like in practice. You go into the room and the patient tells you their story. Every summer, I have a headache for the entire season. Then later, I didn't start having food problems until I was 12. Then, and another thing. And it's mind-numbing. Those different systems suggest maybe an immune imbalance, but it's impossible to put that together in the EHR because the EHR has no mechanism for that. You have two options. So this is the difficult part. You write it down from memory later because you're busy talking, because there's a large flow of information, it's typically how most people do it. Or you write it in the moment. You try to write it all down, but then you're not looking at the patient and you're not connecting with them. So you kind of miss that. So that narrative flow, the symphony of care, kind of that incredible chemistry that comes, that's the entire point of functional medicine. And traditional EHRs destroy it. The screen between you and the patient, you know the story. In functional medicine, you're integrating multi-system data to treat the entire patient. Traditional EHRs force you through a pattern where each disease process is documented in silos. So you got this one, then you got that one, and they don't connect, right? Cardiovascular does not connect with dermatology. Does not, but it does. Allergies, menarche, onset of headache, completely disruptive to the thought process, to the narrative, having silos. There's no place for that kind of data collection that makes it easy to see the underlying roots of the problem rather than those chunked up, stupid individual things. We don't want to treat diagnoses. We want to treat the patient, the whole patient. But your EHR is forcing you to practice traditional medicine, and it might call it functional medicine. That might be the wrapper, but that's a fundamental incompatibility. What this is actually costing you. This isn't about working smarter. Here's what the EHR problem is really stealing from you. Beyond time, what traditional EHRs cost functional medicine practitioners most is their freedom. And here's what I mean. Here's your typical evening after seeing patients all day. Finish the parts that aren't done yet. Oh, God. Mostly box checking. Meaningful use requirements. Hooray! Corporate or government checkboxes that signify you've done a high-quality job. Who cares? You get paid more for checking those boxes, even though they have no impact on patient care. That seems unethical to me. I don't know. Let me tell you a story from earlier in my practice. I did house calls for a whole year. Super fun. Medicare didn't quite believe the doctors still did house calls, so they said, we need to audit your charts. And the documentation I had to submit literally required me to put it on a hand truck. I had stacked up as high as my chest because it wasn't clear documentation. It wasn't readable. It was a bureaucratic nightmare. Took a whole year to resolve. I was taking care of old people in their houses, helping them avoid ambulance rides. I thought I was really good. But the system couldn't process that information because it didn't fit the template. Beyond time, this kind of thing costs us, our providers, our freedom. I didn't want to do that anymore because I didn't want to deal with the bureaucracy. I didn't have the freedom to do what I know is best for the patient because the narrative of that moment wasn't billable. And here I am with a hand truck, and I'm taking care of business, but that's the past. Doctors can't follow their instinct to address the problem that the narrative points out because they don't get paid for it, right? Documentation is incomplete or unreadable. And the powers that be, they don't understand functional medicine. The things that don't happen because of the EHR problem are frequently game changers. I mean, things that are going to totally rock the patient's world. Since they can't be properly documented in a traditional EHR, they're not even considered. I got lots of colleagues who are really good doctors, but they're not going to think about doing some of the things I do because you can't bill and document for them properly in their EHR. There's no time for them because instead, and I don't know if you've gone through this, but you're strategizing some way to make new regulations with my EMR work so I can get this code to pay for that and keep the doors open. Understandably, providers become bitter. They're unhappy with their jobs and their families pay the price because they're distracted and dissatisfied when they come home. Patients pay, probably the highest of all, price because they're not getting the best shot at healing. And that's unacceptable. Here's the official story from EHR vendors. You're just not good at it. Well, thanks. You just need to learn more and eventually you'll master it, which is silly. In the last 10 years, the entire medical community globally, I mean all over the world, has acknowledged the electronic health record is the biggest problem with healthcare. Some people will see other things, but they're not thinking. Most providers feel abandoned so that no one else is doing anything about it. That's where they're coming from. The reason people don't switch is because they've tried that before. And none of them are really all that different. They always eventually work the same. They promise you the world and they give you New Jersey. I don't know. It just doesn't seem right. The fear underneath the fear is that you're going to fail again. And doctors don't need another hit to their self-esteem. That's not necessary. The sense of medical excellence that I know we've all shared at some time. You have a big save or you got into medical school or you finished your degree. The fact that we're part of a really elite group of human beings who can find and resolve serious problems, it's affected. I built Esprē because I lived this problem. I spent years fighting a system that was fundamentally broken and finally realized the tool itself was wrong. So we built something totally different, something that actually respects people and how functional medicine works. If you want to see what documentation looks like when software is built for your kind of practice, your clinical thinking, instead of against it, do a free trial. No payments required and there's no commitment, and the link is in the description. What documentation actually looks like when it's built for functional medicine? What's the alternative? Here's what documentation looks like when the software starts with a patient's story instead of the billing code. Practice management software has to start with the patient's narrative at the core and work back from that. Not to identify a diagnosis and justify charging for it. That makes no sense. Charge for the provider's time and expertise to get to the root of the problem, not only for a diagnosis. The patient's story drives all the subsequent care, and it creates that relationship. It prioritizes their number one concern while taking into account all of the things and how the systems are functioning together to create it. The medical literature shows that capturing the patient's story and knowing it, measured with validated questionnaires, is state of the art. Here's the analogy I use. With the basic data our system collects, it provides a framework for the narrative that gives you the cliff notes of the patient's story. individually derived, their personal cliff notes. So rather than saying, I don't know this patient, I don't know their story, I don't have the first inkling, I don't know the first chapter, and I don't have any idea how it finishes, the system spells out the entire cliff notes story. You know about Tom Sawyer, right? You know about his adventures. You don't know the details, but you're going to ask him about what happened that night in the swamp. That's kind of how it is, right? Then get specific in the area that requires clinical experience and insight. That's what you get. A Cliff Notes version of the patient that's unique to the patient. Not a generic, here's your diagnosis and here's the treatment path. Totally different. Instead, this specific patient has all of these symptom problems and system problems. These are the 2 or 3 that predominate. And you should get to approach them from the best angle that'll get you the results. It has to record the patient's concerns, of course, and the subjective complaints, their story, physical exam, and the provider impression of what's wrong, including the diagnosis, because we do that too, and then a plan, along with the entire integrative process. But add supplements, nutrients, activity, diet, medications, all of that together. A traditional EHR doesn't even understand compounded pharmaceuticals. What? No integrated supplement management. These are non-negotiables for functional medicine, and those things are completely absent from every generic system I've ever seen. Here's what changes when documentation takes 30 minutes instead of 3 hours. Documentation becomes a background activity. It's not the center of attention. It's not in the middle of the room where it should never have been. And that's the cause of all the snafus. That's what's going wrong. The system we use is so visually appealing that when we do want it to be involved, we project it on a large screen TV. Ta-da! Here it is in patient rooms to share lab data, to show as we prescribe, we show the prescribing process so patients can chime in, and all sorts of other teaching and decision-making opportunities because we want it to be the center of the attention when we want it to be. But otherwise, it's in the background. Patients love to be included in the process. Practices that don't solve this are going to stagnate. Patients are going to become much more comfortable with functional medicine and the way that we do integrative care and know that it's the best medicine. Patients are seeking it out, but they're looking for providers who can actually deliver on that promise, not providers who are drowning in ancient systems that clog up the system. It's not just changing the label on healthcare business as usual. It's an entirely different path that connects the patient and the doctor for exceptional results. If you stay with your current system, you're going to miss the boat. If this hits home, there's one more video I want you to watch. It's called From Genesis to Revolution: Why I Built an AI 22 years ago that doctors are just now realizing they need. It's the story behind why this system, Esprē, exists and why it took the rest of the industry 2 decades to catch up. I'll link it right here. Go watch it, and I'll see you there.